What's going on, everybody? This is Afro Think Tank, and today I want to talk about why there's so much turmoil and terrorist activity in West Africa, right? Because I hear a lot of people, they use that as a weapon in conversations, like, well, y'all got this going on, y'all got that going on. And I feel like people don't understand why it is that these issues are happening in West Africa and all of a sudden. So let me explain just a little bit why there's so many terrorist activities happening in West Africa, right? Why Boko Haram and all these groups seem to be able to operate the way they operate in the Sahel region of Africa. Now, if you look at the Sahel is like a belt, right? A belt of land that goes from West Africa to East Africa, right? And that's pretty much the super highway of most of the nomadics and the nomadic peoples and the Arabs. It separates the lush green fertile lands of southern Africa and the desert, the Sahara Desert, the portions where only the most specialized group of people and animals can live, and nobody really lives out there. It's a big dangerous desert, not too much out there, right? But the Sahel, which is a belt which has just enough for people to migrate through, those are ancient trade routes, right? So that's where the Turks and all the Arabs, when they came in to invade, they came through there. So they came from the Arabias, and they kind of made their way through there, right? So what happened was Libya, right? When the UN went to war with Libya to get rid of Gaddafi, right? They were fighting the terrorists, right? The Muslim extremists up there, right? In that area. And while we were fighting in Iraq, Afghanistan, and various other countries, a lot of these so-called terrorist groups, right, were being displaced by America and UN forces. So they made their way down into Africa because that's, like I said, it's a historical trade route. They knew the area. Once America went in and scorched earth, they would have to leave, right? Because they're nomadic, they'll move about, right? And a lot of these people, they don't recognize countries. They don't recognize the idea of countries with borders is not exact. That's a Western thing, right? That's a white European thing where they create a border and they say, oh, this is mine, right? This is mine, this is mine, this is mine. Let's fight over this line that belongs to me, right? A lot of cultures don't really recognize that. Africans and some of the Arabs, we didn't recognize, right, land masses. That's why when you see people say Africa, some people look at Africa as one big country, and it's not. It has over 50-something countries, but the sentiment is them lines really, we didn't draw those lines, and that's not how we operated, right? It's a European thing, and that's why they always fight. If you notice, Europeans, they created the whole idea of countries and states, and they just fought over these territories. That's because they're a fighting culture, right? But anyway, when the Americans and the British and the French and the Italians went to war with Gaddafi, they pushed all those Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Boko Haram, all these groups that have all these names that we know, they pushed them down further south, right? Destabilizing Burkina Faso, Niger, North Nigeria, various other regions. So the issues that's happening in West Africa is a direct result of American policies to go in and take over a country. You see, Gaddafi had it covered. Gaddafi and his government and them, they had control over these groups of people. But when America came in, what they did is they went and found somebody who was opposed to Gaddafi, groups who Gaddafi had under control, who we would call terrorist organizations, and we gave them weapons, we gave them guns, we gave them equipment, we gave them logistics to fight against the governments of Libya and all that stuff. The same way we go in Iraq and Afghanistan. We bring our weapons and our guns and our equipment and we give it to the opposition and let them fight on our behalf. That's always been a policy. It works very well. Same thing that happened when the transatlantic slave trade happened. What did they do? They came to Africa, brought their guns and cannons, gave it to a tribe that was being marginalized. That tribe then was able to dominate and destroy bigger, huge tribes or kingdoms, right? And with overwhelming firepower, right? And then in turn, they would go ahead and sell that same firepower over to the other kingdom, and then vice versa. So you give them the weapons of destruction, you let them kill each other, right? And then after they kill each other and their populations go down, then you step in and you take over and you become the savior. That's what they do, right? And that's one of the things we got to remember. It's the same tactic, right? It's the same tactic. All I got to do is give you the one that show me the bully, I'll give him a gun. Watch what the bully do. I mean, not the bully, the person that's being bullied by the bully. Let me give that person that's being bullied, let me give him a gun and watch what that person being bullied does to the bully. And then after that, let me give the bully a gun and watch what that bully does to the person he was previously bullying. That's how it works, just on a bigger scale, right? So everything that's happening in West Africa with these so-called terrorists, right? Remember, Europeans label these people as terrorists, right? In the West, they label them as terrorists. But everything that's happening in West Africa is a direct result of American and Western foreign powers and their interests. Everything. Because that area is full of diamonds, full of jewels, full of minerals, full of resources. And the only way to get to these resources is to destroy and destabilize the area so that NGOs and so that the UN can go in and pretend like they're coming to save the place, where they'll secure the area, bring in their international troops, and then NGOs, which are non-governmental organizations, come in and somehow start to scoop up the material, right? And they fly them out on their big, huge planes on the bases that they create within these destabilized regions. That's what happens. That's what's happening in Congo. I'm always going to say it started in Congo and it's going to end in Congo. All of this started in Congo and all of this will end in Congo. So once Congo is free, all of Africa is going to be free. I'm telling you right now. That's the truth. So when we're black people having conversations and egos get involved, when we start shooting shots at each other, you got to understand, right? Who the architect of our chaos? Who's the architect of the chaos that's created in our communities, right? So if you want to look at it, on an American side, how's it done in an American side? Well, what did they do in the black communities, right? What did they do? What did the government do in the black communities? They brought the guns into our community, right? And they sold it, or allowed it to be sold to one group of gangsters, right? So now this group of gangsters has all the weapons and overwhelming firepower. Then once these gangsters realize that they can't compete, they have to then in turn beg the same government or the same groups, you know, for those same weapons. And now you have total chaos within the community. Because when you have an opposition and they have more firepower, you have to go get the same firepower. You have to, right? So it becomes an arms race. So the U.S. government, domestic policy when it comes to black people is to destroy the black community by looking for the lower elements of the community that don't value the community and arm them with weapons and logistics so that they can destroy the community, right? In the name of making money, right? Balling, right? Same thing they do with our music, right? They empower people to spew hateful rhetoric over beats to destroy the minds of our people. It's the same thing. That's why we got to start thinking. So they come in our communities to give us drugs. They give us guns to the lowest denomination of our community. They destroy our community. They go to Africa. They do the same thing. They go to the Middle East. They do the same thing. They go to Asia. They do the same thing, because human beings overall, you know, we will act the same we get put in certain situations, right? And they have learned that. So they know all they have to do is arm some people. Like, for instance, Afghanistan. A lot of you guys think that America lost in Afghanistan and they just gave up and gave the Taliban back their country. What you don't know is the Taliban is an American-made political group that we created to fight the Russians, right? And what else you don't know is when we left, we didn't really leave, first of all. America didn't leave Afghanistan, right? What we did was we took that political party, the Taliban, and we allowed them to come from out the mountains into the cities so that we know where they are. And then we started to arm other groups that are against the Taliban. So now the Taliban, who once were the terrorists fighting in the mountains against the invaders, which was us, America, now they are in fact in the cities having to govern. It's one thing to fight, it's another thing to govern. Now they're forced to govern. They're distracted by the process of governing. Their money and resources being used to govern instead of buying bullets and fighting in the mountains of Afghanistan. Now they have to contend with other groups who are being backed by the West, who are arming them and giving them the same weapons and the same armament and the same logistics to fight them. It's much easier to fight a terrorist when they're in a government building in the capital than it is to fight them when they're hiding in the mountains. I know, okay? Literally. So those are strategic tactics that we use to get the results that we want, because Afghanistan is a producer of opium, and that's why we're in there. Let's keep it 100 all the way real. Afghanistan, Cambodia, Vietnam, some of the only places that you can grow opium, and that's why we're over there. I don't care. Don't let anybody else fool you. It's a game of opium, all right? Straight up. But anyway, I just wanted to clear that up. And all these people, all this whole region, right? If you look at Eurasia and where you see the Middle East and what we call the Middle East and Afghanistan and the Persian, if you saw a real map and you saw how small the actual area is, and if you saw how big Africa is, you would see that from Iraq all the way to Morocco, right? This area, well, Africa's massive, but the Middle East that we call Middle East is very small. Very, it's the size, all of that is the size of like a few countries in Africa, like a few countries, right? And then, but the Sahel region, the area which the Arabs, the Turks, and those people in that area know very intimately because of thousands of years of trading, not always conquering, but I mean, we Africans have had international relations for thousands of years. It wasn't always fighting. We trade. That's what human beings do. They trade. We have trade routes. That's just what happens, right? So these were established highways and roads, just like you got 495, I-95, 395, Route 60, 66, those type of things, just over there with camels, okay? So understand the geopolitics and the history of the area. Understand, it's not because West Africans are inherently unable to govern or inherently unable to control their countries or their territories. Keep in mind, these countries and territories were created by the Europeans because we didn't have countries, right? So not only do we have to contend with colonialism, slavery, European barbarian raids, but then we had to contend with, after that, Europeans empowering the Arabs, who they simultaneously destroy, kill, maim, but also push them on West Africans so they can kill two birds with one stone. So they can destabilize the Middle East, the Orient, and they can also destabilize us in one fell swoop. You understand? So you have to understand politics to understand what's going on. So now, African countries who never had to fight these Arabs in such a manner, now they have to deal with the downfall. They have to deal with the fallout from America's foreign policy and the United Kingdom's and UN's foreign policy in North Africa. Because basically the Arabs came and they colonized North Africa, right? Then the Europeans came and colonized the Arabs' colonization of North Africa. That's why if you look at North Africa, right? And let me tell you, when you see North Africa, it's very big, right? And you think that whole place is filled with a bunch of Arabs. No. There's only but so many small livable spots in North Africa. In the grand scheme of things, there's really not that many of them there, because you can only live but so many places. Most of the places are right on the edge by the Mediterranean, right on the edge by the water where the population centers are. Most of North Africa is empty because it's a desert. African people, we don't want to live in the desert, right? If we don't have to, if we're not nomadic. We were smart enough to move down. That's why you have the stories of the West Africans. They have history. They know they migrated from Eastern Africa. They migrated from Egypt. They migrated from Nubia, because these were metropolitan cities where all Africans, just like we move about now. You got somebody that was in New York, they move to California, they go to Florida, they come to DC, they go to Atlanta. Same thing happened there. Same type of humans, we just didn't have cars, all right? They moved about. Africans moved about, right? Just like everybody moved about, right? So, but the majority of people moved down, just like a lot of people are leaving California and they're going to Arizona, right? Why? Because it becomes too expensive. There's things happening there, and they find better places to live. They go to Arizona, they go to Texas, they're moving over here to Atlanta, right? Same thing. Egypt was falling. The regime changed. The weather wasn't so good anymore. Guess what they did? They went right back up to Nile where they were from, right? And they went back to their ancestral homeland where it was still nice and lush because they remember it because that's where they're from, right? And then the Arabs who were in Arabia, who were used to the desert, most of them knew nomadic, had no problem moving in and dealing with the Arab northern parts, staying in the small, short places in North Africa that has enough greenery, enough water for people to survive. But it's not that many of them, right? But so when the Arabs came and took over what was left of North Africa after the massive weather change, which, by the way, that desert is something that happens often in Africa. It's a generational, I don't know what you call it, but it's a generational weather and pattern thing. So basically, in the next like 10,000, don't get me quoting anything exactly, but in a few thousand years, North Africa is going to be back green again. And then I think like 30,000 years pass, and it goes back to the desert, and it goes back and forth. It goes back and forth. But right now is the time of the desert, right? So the desert people love the desert, but it's not that many of them up there. So when the Arabs came in and took over what was left of North Africa after we done moved out, right? The Europeans came in and colonized the colonizer. That's why you got so many white people. If those North Africans, Libyans, and a lot of the Moroccans, and a lot of those Egyptians did their DNA, it would say Europe. It would say Europe. It would say Turkey. It would say all those places because that's where they're from, right? So they're like double colonizer. The colonizer got colonized, right? So they got a lot of shit going on up there. But the result of radical Islamic politics and the way they decide they want to live their life and their relationships with radical Christianity, which is the UN, and they've been fighting for thousands of years. Because of that, West Africa and Central Africa has to deal with the fallout and the side effects of all those things now. And so that's what's happening right now. So it's not any fault of our own. It's all things we have to deal with when dealing with the barbarian and dealing with these Arab barbarians who still want to live like it's the goddamn freaking 700s and shit. They don't want to evolve. They want to just keep fighting over which Abrahamic religion is number one, and you know, can a woman do this, and blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? Anyway, I hope that cleared up a few things for you to understand why West Africa has to deal with all of this mess, right? It ain't our fault, but it's something we still got to deal with because that's reality. Anyway, that's all I got to say. It's Afro Think Tank. Learn some, teach them. I'm out.